Hello. This is different. I don't usually do this. Probably have my headset off for the purposes of this stream, most likely. That might be more comfortable. Anyways, my cat is behind me. Squeaker, do you want to say hi to the live stream? Say hi. Yeah. She'll probably want to get up and leave at some point. Anyways, look. I promised that I would do a tier list of ideologies. That's exactly what I intend to do. If my browser will cooperate, that would certainly be nice. Why is my desktop audio is enabled? Oh, right. I have alerts and stuff. Duh. Silly me. Okay. Ideologies. Let's see. Tier list maker. Ideologies. Create an ideology tier list. Squeaker, no. Don't do that. She's scratching up my reading chair again. Oh boy. This is, quite the tier list. There's more, okay. This is exactly one of the things that I was worried about when it came to creating a tier list like this. If I go here, oh, you can't see what I'm looking at. That's a problem. OBS, what are you smoking right now? Hello? This one? No, that's not the right one. That has all the OBS stuff on it. Yes, this one. Okay, perfect. You guys see this? Can you see my screen right now? Look at all of this shit. Alright? This is exactly like... Okay. At some point, a little bit later, I am going to find something like this and try to put as many of them as I can on a tier list like this. But right now, that's not what I wanted to do. Right now... Here, let me actually go back here while I'm looking for this. I wanted to find something where I could basically... just use the like, 3 ideologies that I consider to be, like, the main ideologies right now. Table, hello, welcome back to, chat. I don't see the first time chatter next to your name, so I assume you've been here before. Politics tier list templates. New template. Here, I'll create my own. Extreme... here, hold on. King Alex was my old user, but changed it. Gotcha. Make your own template. Create single use. Sure, single use template. Okay, perfect. Now, I'm gonna try to find an image. Okay. Alright. Wikipedia, hammer and sickle. Here, I'll show you guys my screen so you can see what I am doing. There we go. Still at school, sadly. Don't get out for 20 more minutes. It's all good. Do what you gotta do. So, what I wanted to do was do an ideology tier list, because some people in my chat requested it a little while ago. I don't know why I didn't get notified. I only realized you were live streaming by going on Discord. I see. Classic. Hey, here you go, sweet. Not wanted to be let out. So, I'm gonna save this image. Alright, cool. And I'm going to drag it here. This is going to represent socialism. Alright? There's only going to be 3 ideologies here. 3. Actually 4, but it's mostly just going to be 3. Okay. Hammer and sickle, fascists. What's the good? Yeah, here we go. Wikipedia. Sure. I don't know why Twitch doesn't notify me. I watch you every time. So, silly things do be happening on twitch.tv. Okay. Here we go. It defaulted to a folder where I was working on a video, but sure. I'll just download it there. Okay. We're gonna have a fascies there. And then, liberalism is usually like a torch, right? Liberalism torch? Yeah, here we go. I've used this before. People who watch my channel will know I actually used this in an A/B thumbnail test. What even is that thing? What, the hatchet and faggot? That is the symbol of fascism. It's funny that fits liberalism. It doesn't last forever. Yeah. What's funny is the torch has also been a symbol of fascism before, which is fitting because of the overlap that I have explained at various points between liberalism and fascism. At the, the torch lighting at the Olympics was started by, I believe, the Nazis in Germany, like as part of the big ceremony. Reality is fascism or communism pills. Yeah, it's true. I wonder here. Okay, feudalism. Oops. Feudalism symbol. I don't know. We'll use. Sure, we'll use this. Shoutouts to whichever vexillologist on Reddit, amateur vexillologist came up with this. Sure. Save image as. Whatever. So, now we come back here, and we have our 4 ideologies, which I will soon explain how there are only really 3. Square images, whatever. So we're gonna edit these tier lists. Because there's only 4 ideologies here, there's only gonna be 4 tiers. So, I'm gonna delete this. We're gonna have this. S for socialism. Obviously, socialism goes in the top tier. Some people are like, Donald Trump will protect Gaza. Certified people are morons moment. No, it's obviously they're wrong, but I don't think there's any merit in focusing on that right now because of, like, what the fuck kind of power do they have, even if they realized it? Yeah, if Donald Trump is saying something, you should assume that he's lying. Good rule of thumb. Then we have feudalism down here. I'm putting feudalism at the bottom because it is a dead ideology. It is not a relevant ideology anymore, but it is meaningfully different enough from the other 3 that I see fit to include it on this tier list particularly. And then I'll explain why I put the ideologies where I put them. Some people want to bring feudalism back. Yes, we call them fascists, or alternatively retards. Feudalism is never coming back. It was its own. I'll explain why, but feudalism was its own systemic and legal thing that was actually it was firmly done away with. A lot of the makings of feudalism still have like reminiscent parts in modern liberalism and fascism, but a proper feudalist system is not capable of existing anymore unless some massive technological regression occurs. Otherwise, what we get is one of these 3. Liberalism, socialism, fascism. Now, I'm going to put L for liberalism. There you go. And then F for fascism. Okay. This is what I wanted to do first. Because they like taking the L? Yes. Now, let's be clear here. liberalism, I do believe, is not long for this world. Eventually, at some point in the intermediate future, probably while I am alive, liberalism will move down here with feudalism. Liberalism is a dying ideology, and the only relevance it still has is in the aesthetic flourish that fascists use to justify their own agenda, their governance, etc., right? Eventually, liberalism will be entirely subsumed into fascism, at which point it'll just be fascism, and then what we remember as liberalism, the Enlightenment philosophies of Adam Smith and Rousseau and Locke, will be down here with feudalism in the history books, forever forgotten to time. Or maybe not forgotten to time, but like relegated to a past era. Is it funny that every ideology that thinks they're invincible dies? No, I would say that's a pretty inherent characteristic of an ideology of a political system, right? Because nothing can last forever. Like, all ideologies are imperfect, and they have their own internal contradictions. There are flaws in each ideological system. The harder they convince themselves that they are perfect, the more guaranteed it is that at some point that ideology will collapse. Does that make sense? Effectively, like, with here, let me move these around a little bit. So, in the case of liberalism, liberal capitalism, it convinced itself that it was permanent, and with the image of its own permanence, it like liberals and liberal governments, states around the world convinced themselves that they didn't need to do anything. Why would we need to change anything or fix any of the flaws in the system if the system is fundamentally flawless and will literally be course corrected for supernaturally by a divine immaterial force? Liberals literally believe this, by the way. Not all of them, but there's a substantial amount of liberals, not the least of whom being the liberals in power, that believe that there is a divine right. Ironic, considering that liberalism was first and foremost a rejection of feudalism, that will alter the course of history to preserve liberal ideology. And where the difference between liberalism and feudalism is that it's not necessarily from a place of wanting to just protect hierarchy. Of course, it does come from that place in a way, and that's part of how liberalism gets subsumed into fascism. But ultimately, it's just the belief that, like, justice will prevail, and we need not act to make that the case. They have an objection. A lot of liberals, particularly the politicians, have an ideological objection to using power. And part of that is a rejection of hierarchy and a rejection of authoritarianism, but it is a false rejection. By rejecting the use of power, what you enable is people who are willing to use power for their own ends to use it unopposed. Sometimes I wonder how they even got into power. Inertia. Easy. Communism doesn't work. NetMK, welcome to chat. I will save that for a minute, but right now I'm explaining liberalism, why I put it at the L spot on the tier list. This is just a very simple tier list. I'll get to a more complicated one like this, which looks like a... actually, no, not that one. It was another one. There's a way bigger one. So, liberalism didn't used to always be this festering cesspit of nothingness. It didn't used to be an ideology of complacency and stagnation. Liberals used to do stuff. People often forget that socialists originated within the liberal movement that was a rejection of feudalism. Thomas Paine, Rousseau, and who else? Some of the early socialists. I forget who they are, but a very obvious example was that Marx. Marx was a liberal until he undertook a very large project of examining a liberal political economy to find some of the flaws that needed to be that would need to be fixed, and to understand the material forces at work that resulted in the outcomes that you saw in states around Europe at the time. Marx, through seeing a lot of contradictions, was radicalized into becoming a socialist and diagnosed it like, yeah, holy shit, there's a lot of exploitation and inequality that is not just incidental, but is part of the system. And so we need to fix these fatal flaws. Thomas Paine, very similar thing, but about what, 70 years earlier, maybe more, where the founding fathers of the United States, Thomas Paine being one of them, were by and large liberals. However, most of them were property owners. They were wealthy. They owned slaves. Thomas Paine was like, hey, wait a minute. We all agree that we need to break free from Britain because, that's bad. Monarchy, no representation, taxation without representation. We all agree on that. But what I'm interested in, what Paine was interested in, is creating a common sense republic. He was interested in democracy as a concept. He was an agrarian socialist. He advocated for the public ownership of land and resources under a democratic state, which would then be able to allocate and use those resources by the consent of the people, however that looked. Very early form of socialism under a liberal system, and the founding fathers, he said, and I totally believe him on this, were merely interested in the furthering of their own property interests in breaking away from the United Kingdom, because they were nouveau riche. They were wealthy, but they weren't part of the European, old wealth. They weren't part of the European aristocracy that was wealthy by virtue of family connections and the sort of feudal apparatus of power. So what they wanted to do was basically, they wanted to just become the new boss. And Thomas Paine was like, you fucking hypocrite pieces of shit. And as a result, they ostracized him from, the political cool kids club in America after he wrote Common Sense, which was directly a critique of the founding fathers. How did the guys get popular to begin with anyway? I doubt he was the first one to figure it out. He was not. The socialism has existed for longer than liberalism has, believe it or not. As early as the Roman Republic, there are academics and philosophers who advocate for the common ownership of all things and all modes of production, the abolition of slavery, the liberation of the workforce, and the abolition of aristocratic family power. Socialism, very old ideology, very sturdy ideology, I would say. America wants you to think that the people who started the revolution were random people, even though they were a group of elites. Not necessarily. The American Revolution obeyed a similar set of patterns to other revolutions throughout history, such as the Iranian and Russian revolutions in the early 20th and mid to late 20th centuries, respectively. The revolution was started by random people. There was genuine civil unrest in the United States. You can't have a massive nationwide revolution that breaks out into a war of independence without that bottom-up support. What happened was, because bottom-up support is largely heterogeneous, because the people are not a monolith. People have various different and sometimes ill-defined reasons for wanting to leave. And the elites, the founding fathers, who had those connections, who had that wealth, were able to seize upon that mass sentiment and direct it towards something that was convenient for them. They were opportunists. In the same way that Lenin or the Ayatollah and the religious fundamentalists in Iran were opportunists during their revolutions, so too were the founding fathers in America. They co-opted a revolution that was already brewing. Does that make sense? Because in Iran, to draw a parallel, a lot of the revolutionaries, most of the revolutionaries in Iran were not the religious fundamentalists. Most of them were secularists, Democrats, socialists, and anarchists. That was the bulk of the coalition, but there was also a fifth group. There was the religious fundamentalists who hated the Shahdom because it represented, Western decadence and Western control, whatever. Similar enough sounding motivation to some of the other ones revolving around self-determination, but they had the hierarchical power and the connections within the government and the sort of opportunist elements within them that were willing and able to basically strike at a moment of uncertainty and vulnerability and purge the other elements from the revolution and seize power. And as a result, Iran, instead of going from Shahdom to flourishing democracy, potentially even a socialist democratic experiment, went from the Shahdom to the Islamic Republic. Hello, Editing Y2K here. This is just one part of a multi-part series of me ranking all the ideologies that I know enough about to comment on. It took place over the course of 2 live streams earlier in the year, and the other parts will be all available on a playlist if you're interested. Please check it out, and thank you for watching.